This video is going to be pretty different than my typical video because this video is going to be my entire workflow for creating a video here on YouTube. We're going to go all the way from getting the ideas to a finished product. I'm going to show you the basics of how I create my thumbnails, my audio processing, the gear I use. There's just going to be an enormous amount of information inside of this video. I'm going to have a link down below with all of the gear I'm using, all of the plugins I'm using. So everything that's mentioned inside of this video will be on that page. Maybe grab a snack, get comfortable. It's going to be a long one. Feel free to come back to this video at any time as you watch it, maybe in multiple pieces. The very first step that comes with any video, obviously on YouTube, is the idea process. A question I get asked quite frequently is how do I keep coming up with ideas specifically for Final Cut Pro? I have a very niche channel. It's just focused on Final Cut Pro editing and of course Apple Motion. So how can I continue to come up with ideas for over 400 videos over nearly 5 years of doing this? The three key areas that I get ideas from: number one, just watching YouTube videos. I love YouTube. That's why I wanted a job doing YouTube. And so I focus on different concepts that I might be able to present as I'm watching YouTube videos. So I might be watching a video from Johnny Harris and I'll say, oh, that map animation is cool. Maybe I can try and present that information inside of a video. And then the second way I get ideas is just being physically active. As I'm doing those physical activities, I'm out hiking, whatever it is, the second I get an idea, I try and write it down as quickly as possible. The third way that I come up with ideas is honestly from all of you in the comments. Every time you guys present an idea in the comments, just know that I'm probably getting it and I've probably written it down for a future potential video. There's just a lot of comments, so I can't respond to everybody, but I do my very best as just kind of a one-man show. Thank you for writing the comments. It does mean a lot. And please continue sending in the ideas from your comments, your emails. I even have a special section over on my Patreon Discord. There are a lot of them. I will definitely never get to all of them, but that is a great source of inspiration. And I really have all of you to thank for the continued ideas here on the channel. Once the idea is in place and I feel like I'm ready to present on a topic, that is where step number 2 comes into play, and that is the preparation for recording. So the first part of prepping to record is considering what the title of this video is going to be. Oftentimes I'll come up with just a basic title that kind of broadly covers all of the concepts of the video. I'll try and come up with some iterations, and more recently I've been able to plug in that title into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you give me 10 ideas for this video? I don't try to rely on ChatGPT too much because a big part of what's fun about video editing is coming up with the ideas yourself. It's there as kind of a small back and forth brainstorming. How do I get this video packaged properly to get people interested in it? That's what I use ChatGPT for. But then on top of that, I'm trying to come up with what is this thumbnail going to look like in the end. I don't sit down and actually make the thumbnail right then. It's just a basic concept of, okay, where could I go with this thumbnail? A lot of my thumbnails are pretty similar, if we're being honest, so it doesn't take me an enormous amount of time. That's probably something I need to maybe put a little more energy and focus into. So once I have kind of a thumbnail and title idea, I can jump into prepping for the recording by creating a folder structure. So what I do for that is I use a free app called Haste. And again, I'll have this link down below. So Haste just sits here in my dock, and Haste is a very simplistic app. I'm not going to show how to use it. I have a full video on that, but I will show you kind of the basics. So for this specific video that we're working on, I've already created a folder structure, but this is how I would do it. Haste automatically increases this number value. So I'm on T437. That's just kind of how I number everything so that I can accurately track each and every video. In YouTube Studio, I can see what the original file name is, so if I ever need to jump back to an older video and locate the footage or whatever, I can find that number. So it's T437, and let's say that my title and thumbnail idea was how to animate in Final Cut Pro. Once I do that, I go ahead and just press Create Project. the beauty of Post Haste is I've loaded in this template structure here. And so in that template, we have our libraries. So I have a Final Cut Pro library, and then I have a footage folder. So over here, we've got my tutorial footage. This is my screen recordings, my face recordings. Everything would go in there. I have my stock footage. So anything I download from Envato. By the way, this video is not sponsored by anybody, but there are some apps that I use all the time, and I will have affiliate links down below. And then images is just little images I download off the internet, or if I screenshot something, all of those sit in my images folder. And then I have this audio folder, which is going to have any music that I'm using for the project. Again, that's probably going to come from Envato or Soundstripe. And then I have a sound effects folder. I don't actually use this sound effects folder too frequently because I use another app called Soundly, which I'll cover a little later in this video. And then I have an exports folder, and this exports folder is obviously where I'm going to export my footage to, but something that's really annoying is I can't have Final Cut Pro automatically name the export for me to exactly what I have the library name for. What I've done is I've added a little text edit file with the correct naming structure using Post Haste. And so when I'm exporting, I can just click on that and that will automatically rename the folder for me. Super handy. Then after that, I have a thumbnails folder, and this is where I'm going to export any PNGs of myself doing a crazy YouTube face. This is where I also have a preset file made. So I created this in Affinity Photo, so I'll get into that a bit more down the road when I'm showing you the actual thumbnail creation process. And then lastly, in my folder structure is this miscellaneous folder. I don't know if I've ever used the miscellaneous folder. It's just there if I need it. So now that I have my folder structure created, which happens in just a couple seconds using Post Haste, I can start to really prep this particular tutorial. For the tutorial that we originally recorded that I will be editing down in this video, I was thinking, okay, I'm just showcasing animation inside of Final Cut Pro, and I need a really clear, clean concept that's not going to be distracting on screen to present that. So I decided to use my Pro Shapes plugin because that just has some really clear, visuals. I just have a square, which a square is a great object because you can show rotation if you need to. So before I ever record anything, I'll go in and I'll create a new project, and I'll just type in new media. A lot of the time I will name this project as subscribe, so there's a nice little subliminal message on the screen, and then I will push OK. Sometimes I will set the project to 4K in resolution, but a lot of the time I'll leave it at 1080p just to make sure everything is working as quickly as possible. It's really just going to come down to the specific project. For this one, I wanted to show animation, so I went ahead and used my Pro Shapes plugin, which is found in my generators here. And I just loaded in a nice gradient background. I felt like this gradient background was a bit too distracting, so I went ahead and just kind of made it a darker blue color. And I feel like that helped the information. So I'm not going to go super deep onto this stuff. But once I had that background, I went ahead and dropped in a rectangle, which I felt was too large. So I ended up having the size on it to 250 by 250. And then it was at that point that I felt like I was prepared to record. So I didn't need any stock elements for this video. I just felt like this is all the information you need, and I can show all of the techniques for my video. And so you might think, oh, I just push record right at that second, but this is where I really try and hone in on the video and make it as easy as possible to follow. I will actually spend maybe 2 or 3 times running through the entire process that I'm going to be teaching, and I just kind of whisper it to myself. My voice really doesn't last very long while I'm talking out loud like this, so I try and whisper it, that way I don't exhaust my voice, but it helps me to get the ideas across. I don't script anything. When I started this channel, I felt like it was really important that I didn't choose to script anything. I know scripting is really, really effective at getting information across clearly, but something that I wanted to learn was the skill of presenting information, thinking ahead, and speaking on it without needing to script it. I just felt like that would help me in conversation in real life, and if I ever had the opportunity to present on stage at something like the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, I wanted to be able to present that information clearly and have all of this practice of hours and hours of just talking to the camera and making up stuff as I go. That has been a really effective method for me. I can keep my setup really light and easy. So I don't do any scripting. I just run through the information 2 or 3 times before I record, and then I take it from there. So once I've run through the process of the whole tutorial 2 or 3 times, just kind of whispering to myself, that's when it's time to record. And a lot of people have been asking me, what do I use for screen recording? For a long time, I was just using QuickTime to record my screen. And QuickTime is awesome. It's completely free and it records really high quality and the file sizes are super tiny. So I love QuickTime. That said, I wanted to add an additional level of professionalism to my tutorials. I noticed a lot of people having some kind of mouse smoothing as they're moving around the screen, and I felt like that was really helpful, keeping the viewer engaged with the video, but also for clearly understanding where the mouse is moving to. I have very sporadic mouse movements. I work way too quickly. I need to slow down. I know. So I found this really great app called Screen Studio. Again, not sponsored, but I absolutely love Screen Studio. Screen Studio allows me to have mouse smoothing. Screen Studio records in a pretty high quality format. Not as good as QuickTime, but it is very good. And it has the option of adding in click animations if you want to after the fact. It even has the option of auto zooming if you want to. I find that that doesn't work very well for my particular channel, but if you don't feel like editing inside of Final Cut Pro, that can be a really great method. So Screen Studio is awesome. I will have links to that over on the page with all of the affiliate links. For my actual filming of my videos, that is where I'm using the Sony a7S III. Let me just record a little video here. So I have this main display that I do. Really like this display. Over here on the left, I have my MacBook Pro. It's an M4 Max. And on that, I have Ecamm Live running. You might be asking, why am I not recording through Ecamm Live and why am I even using it? I use Ecamm Live specifically for live streaming, of course, but I also use it for a quick LUT preview of what my final video is going to look like. So you can see that it adds in all the contrast and everything, because right now I'm recording in log, but I don't record with Ecamm specifically because I find the file sizes are just way larger than if I were to record with Screen Studio and using the internal recording on this camera, or I guess SD card recording. The Sony a7S III is the camera that I use with a 24mm lens, and then I just recently switched over to this super tiny microphone. Normally I have a big ol' shotgun XLR hanging off the top, but it was kind of annoying me how much space it was taking up here. So I decided to try this tiny mic and process it in the same way. And I'm actually really happy with the audio levels. So I will have the other XLR mic that I typically was using, but I'm also going to have this little mic linked on that one page. And then over on the left, I have this little Amaran, what is that? I forgot what number. The Amaran 60X. And you might be asking, why is it just pointed into the wall? Well, I don't have like a full lantern softbox or anything like that on it. And so I just found that bounce lighting looked a lot better for me. So I just decided, hey, the wall's white, I'll bounce it off of that. I also have these Klipsch speakers that doesn't really pertain much to the recording. That's more of an editing thing, but you get the idea. I also have this Mac Studio here, which I use when I'm live streaming. That way I don't have all of the computer power on one system. But yeah, that's kind of the main idea. And I know, gonna get a comment, why do I have this, this editing console for DaVinci Resolve? I originally purchased this so I could get Resolve Studio included with it. I have used it one time, considering selling it, but it does look kind of cool. So I don't know, maybe it's a cool little decoration. So I have everything prepped and ready to go. I start recording using Screen Studio. This particular video I have already filmed, but that is the whole process leading up to it. And that is when I will take about 30 to 40 minutes and record a video. Sometimes I feel really good about the first recording and I won't even worry about trying to record it again. Other times everything's going to go wrong. My voice is tired. I'm just not feeling the energy of the first video. And so I will re-record the entire way through just to make sure that everything comes across really nicely. The video you're watching right now, though, I'm not going to record twice because it's going to take a very long time to get through. Once I am done recording, the very first thing I start to do is exporting out the recording from Screen Studio. Screen Studio is not as instantaneous as QuickTime. It does take a while to get in all of the animations of the mouse and the click animations, everything that comes into play with that. That said, I do think the end result is worth it. So while Screen Studio is exporting in the background, which it's already done for this video, I will go ahead and offload the media from my SD card and my camera onto the computer. So I can get a good preview, make sure everything looked good. I'll just scrub through really quickly and that's looking great. So I'm happy with the results of that and I can jump to the next part of this process. What I will do is open up an app called Timebolt. Now, there are many variations of apps like this. Timebolt is my favorite. This just essentially takes out all of the non-speaking parts of the video, which previously took me a whole lot of time to cut out, and so this does it automatically. So I'll open up Timebolt. So once that has done, we can see all the red bits are the parts where I'm not speaking in the video. That's great. There's a whole lot of stuff with Timebolt, and I do have a video on that. All I need to do is press this FCP XML multicam, and then that allows me to click directly on it, and there it is in my viewer. So this just spits out an XML with all of those edits made for me, and it's really great because it puts it into a multicam, which is essential for the way that I edit. Now that that has done the XML, we can double click on that and select the project we want to work with. We need to look up the animation complete guide, which is T435, and choose that. It always brings up this little error message. It just says something's up with the XML. I'm sure it's user error on my end, but it's really not an issue. We'll just push OK, and now we have our project here, and I can open that up. You can see that all of the cuts have been made across the board, and this is so incredibly handy. But you might be wondering, okay, how do you have the on-screen footage synced up with the actual talking head? Well, that is where the multicam comes into play. So what I will do is open up the multicam by double clicking on it. And now we can see my entire footage here. And from there, I'm just going to add in an additional angle. So to do so, we'll just click this down arrow and select add angle. And I'll just call this Screen Studio. After that, I will go ahead and locate my Finder and just drag in the Studio Display recording, just like so, making sure that it's not longer than the original recording up here. I always try and record the screen after I push record on the camera. We can go ahead and press this down arrow and then select Sync Selection to Monitoring Angle. So that's going to line those two shots up, and then I can re-extend the beginning of this. The reason that you don't want this studio display to be longer than the original footage is all of these edits were made based off the original shot. If that studio display is longer, it's going to completely desynchronize all of these cuts. So everything would get shifted to the left or right. It's really, really annoying. So you have to make sure that you're syncing to the original clip and not the other way around. Now this studio display is synchronized with everything, and I can very quickly change all of my footage by just selecting it all, going up to the top right, finding this eye, and then we could change the active video angle over to Screen Studio. Most of my videos are taking place looking at the screen. So what I like to do up front is set pretty much everything except for the intro over to the Screen Studio. Then from that point, as I'm going through, if I feel like there's a shot that needs to show my face, then I will go ahead and change it over at that time. But I just find that setting everything to the screen first, because that's my primary angle, is much easier. You'll also notice that there's this option for active audio angle. I'll get into that in just a little bit because I like to process my audio after I've made sure that I'm really happy with the content of the video. So now that we have everything down on the timeline, everything synchronized, I might jump inside of my actual video and I will apply a color grading preset to my video here. So what we can do is jump over to my effects, and I've just called it Tutorial Grade 2025. And I will place that on. What this is a whole bunch of different effects taking place. So we can take a look here at my video inspector. The first one is the correction wheels. So I typically film just a little bit overexposed when I'm working with S-Log. And so these color wheels are bringing that down to the level that it needs to be. Then the next one is actually a vignette, which I'll just rename so you can clearly see what's going on here. So I place those above the custom LUT. And the custom LUT is just a transform LUT. So it's not applying any creative grade to my video. It's just helping me get the video from S-Log back into Rec 709. So it adds the correct contrast and saturation, everything like that. And then finally, I have this little shape mask. Why do I have this shape mask? Well, by default, it's disabled, which is really handy. But what I can do is line this up with a part of my forehead. And if I push Command 7, I can bring up my scopes and I could change this over to the vector scope and make sure that my show skin tone indicator line is on. So we can see, oh, my skin tones are a little bit off on this shot. And so I can push Command 6, go over to my color wheels, and now I can just push the actual grade over here just a little bit so that I get my skin tones lined up. I'm not a colorist, okay? Just throwing that out there. And so that can get my skin tones a bit more accurate here, which is really nice. Looks like my saturation is going absolutely insane. That's a topic for another day. But this basic grade gets me into the place that I need to be to go ahead and edit my video. So the first part of my process is to go through and just clear out anything that I don't want in the video. I don't do any J-cuts yet. I don't do any graphics, any zooming, anything like that. The first pass is purely just for removing all of the junk. First, I'll just go through and start playing to see what my favorite intro is. In this video, I'm going to show you absolutely everything you need to know about animation inside of Final Cut Pro. So I feel really good about that intro, so I'll go ahead and just delete the beginning stuff. And a super handy thing I have done to make my editing life so much faster is by changing some of my custom keyboard sets. When I'm recording, I like to set the custom keyboard set back to the default, that way everybody's on the same page. But while I'm editing, I go up to Final Cut Pro Command Sets and make sure I'm on my custom M4 Max option. So in here, I have changed stuff like the actual delete key is just X. That makes it super easy to chop stuff out. I've also made it so I can trim right or left by pushing G or by pushing H. So you can see that I can very quickly cut through my footage by pushing G, H, and X. Real quick, let's cover the basics. How do you do animation? Okay, so this is where I'm actually starting to talk about the video. Because we have a multicam setup, I can push Option 1. And what that does is it changes the actual shot without creating a cut to my talking head. So the reason why it's Option 1 is because it is the first camera angle here. By the way, I got the angle editor with Command Shift 7. Now, I don't like that there's 4 screens up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and change this over to 2 angles, and I'll shrink that down a little bit so I can clearly see what's on the screen. Now, when I want to cut back and forth between the 2 different angles, I'm going to make sure that I switch my angle editor to video only mode. We want to make sure that it all has the same audio, but the video is what's changing. And what I can do now is just push 2, and now we're changing back over to my screen. When I want to cut out a specific section, I'm going to use my range tool. So I push R to get the range tool, click and drag over that part, and then I'll push X to delete it. Also, a lot of the time I'm playing at double speed, which you can achieve with pushing L twice. So you'll also have those gray diamonds over here on the right side. Now, whenever I need to add a specific graphic on screen that comes into mind, for example, this is a keyboard shortcut, I go ahead and prep myself for later on by pushing M to add in a marker. If I feel like there's a need for maybe some B-roll, or I just need to get some stock footage, something like that, I will go ahead and change that marker over to a to-do item. I also use this frequently if I need to re-record a section. And also, if I have different parts of the video throughout, I will go ahead and set that to a chapter marker. From there, I could rename this to be animation basics or whatever I want, but I'll go ahead and go throughout the entire video while I'm chunking it down to its main core parts, and I'll continue to add those markers, to-do lists, and chapter markers. It just makes it super easy for me to jump around, and those chapter markers are going to come in super handy when it's time to upload this video to YouTube. For this instance, I just want this basic marker, and I'll just say keyboard shortcut. After all of that, we have taken this video that was about 25 minutes or so in length and trimmed it all the way down to 15. Some people ask me, is it important to have a specific length of video for YouTube? If you ask me, a lot of YouTube is just doing good videos and make it the video length that it needs to be. So if your video needs to be only 2 minutes, make it only 2 minutes. If it needs to be a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour like this video is probably going to be, make it that long. Another question I get asked a lot is why I don't use something like Gling to edit through my videos. For those of you that don't know what Gling is, Gling essentially creates a transcription of your video based off of the audio, and then it will automatically detect if you said something twice, and it will remove the bad takes. It's honestly a really cool piece of software, but I personally like to have all of my takes on the timeline because sometimes I will say a certain sentence better than other times, and so I can kind of splice pieces together. That's my own personal preference. It's really up to you how you like to edit. So we have everything trimmed down, and I know for a fact that I feel really good about how this video is, so I can finally go ahead and process my audio before following on to the other steps. How do I process my audio? Well, I do have a more in-depth video on this, but I'm going to quickly show you in this video. So you might think that I just export out the video with the finished audio cut down, but I personally like to have everything processed all at once. It just gives me a lot more flexibility in the edit. So what I will do is instead head to Finder and locate my actual project. And you can already see I have a stripped out audio here, but here is the primary video clip. And the video clip contains all of my microphone audio. As I showed earlier, I'm recording directly into camera. Now, you might be asking yourself, why am I not recording the audio directly into the computer? Well, I was doing that previously, but for some reason, my little Camlink 4K occasionally just completely freezes, and so I would lose all of my audio. So I know for a fact that my audio is going to be in the video clip if I use the primary video clip that I filmed. So now that I've located my video clip, I can just simply right-click on it, select Open With, and you'll see that I have this Apple lossless droplet. I just dropped a video on the channel not too long ago about creating droplets with compressor. Essentially, droplets are just a mini app or just kind of a piece off of compressor that allows you to very quickly process and encode your video file to a specific codec that you want. But what I use it for is to just simply remove the video element from the audio element, and then I can upload that audio for processing. So in this instance, I would select Apple Lossless, press Allow, and here is the droplet, super minimalist, so you don't even need to really know how to use compressor, and then we can just press Start Batch. It's giving me this warning because I've already done this once, but we'll go ahead and process it. Once it is done, I can go over to Auphonic.com. I have a whole video on Auphonic. I really love Auphonic. Basically, we'll just head over to Safari, look up Auphonic.com, and I would just upload my audio here to Auphonic. I'm not going to show the entire process there, but once it's done, I would go ahead and download it, which I have it right here. I've already processed it. I've already downloaded it. And then I place that over inside of my audio folder here inside of my folder structure. Essentially what Auphonic does is it removes a lot of the room tone, the reverb that you're hearing around here. I do live kind of near a highway, so there's a lot of traffic noise. I'm super close to an airport, so there are a lot of airplanes overhead. So this just completely removes all of that and gives me a really clean vocal that I can use for my tutorials. Some people think it's too processed, other people have been loving it, so I'm just gonna do what I think sounds good. It's my video, I do what I want. So now that I have my processed audio, I can add it to my project. And just like we did previously for adding in the screen, we can do the same with audio. So I'm just gonna jump inside of my multicam. You'll see I have primary angle, screen studio. Let's go ahead and add in another angle. And this is just my audio processed. And from there, I can go ahead to my Finder and drag in my processed audio. And what's great is this is going to be the exact same length as the primary clip. So I can go ahead and just move that into place. And then we can also double check by clicking this down arrow and selecting Sync Selection to Monitoring Angle. So now those should be perfectly synchronized and we have the processed audio. From there, I like to add some equalization to the audio clip because if you ask me, it sounds a little bit flat. To my ear, I'm not an audio engineer, just a video editor, and I like the sound of my voice with a certain processing. So take with that what you will. So here it is before we process it. So it's just specifically the transform tool. So it's very clean and that's nice, but I have a tutorial EQ preset that I've created and I will go ahead and apply that on. Now this drops the audio a little bit in decibels. So we'll just bring that up with Control plus 1, 2, 3. And now we are good to go. So we can see how this sounds like now. So it's just specifically the transform tool. For those of you wondering what my EQ looks like, all I've done is jumped over here to the equalization. I've dropped off this low end, brought up the low end a little bit here. You can copy these settings if you like. Again, not an audio engineer. This is what I like for my particular voice. And I might note it's also what I like for the sound of my particular speakers. So it might sound different on your system, but for me, it sounds good. And yeah, so I'm just going to keep doing it. So now that we've done that, we can back out of the multicam and we need to change all of this over to that new audio. So I'm just going to select it all. We'll go over to our little eye and we can change the active audio angle over to audio processed. Now, everything has turned to this teal color, which is actually the color of effects. So we can go ahead and jump inside really quick and change the actual roles on this by right-clicking, selecting Assign Audio Role, and changing that over to Dialogue, which I usually do with Control-Option-D. Now it's all the blue color. Why does this matter? Well, it just makes it a little bit more visually clear to me what is the correct audio role for each audio lane that I'm working with. So if I have sound effects or music, anything like that, I will know clearly. Why is everything going to the effects role by default? Well, I find that I am bringing in mostly effects to Final Cut, and I don't want to keep changing the audio roles for those. If you push Command-I and get to your import window, you'll see over here there's this Assign Audio Roles, and normally it's set to automatically, but I have found that it is almost never accurate at assigning audio roles. Because the role I'm using the most is effects, I just set it over to effects and then I manually change the dialogue and music, which are typically like only 2 audio files, and then everything else is going to be an effect by default. This is where I can really start to tighten up the edit. This is where I'm going to add in the J cuts, the L cuts, where I'm going to add in the jump cuts. Somebody's probably going to ask, what in the world is a J or an L cut? Essentially, that is just creating a J shape in your video. So if you take a look here, we have the audio playing before the actual video clip comes into play. Or taking a look at this other clip, if we want to do an L cut, that's where the secondary video is starting to play as the audio is still ending on this primary clip, and it kind of looks like an L. So that is what this particular pass through the video is going to be. So firstly, I'm going to just take out some of this time. I feel like there's a little bit too much of a pause for an intro. We'll delete that out. Then I'm going to get my arrow tool with A. We'll select this second clip. Then I'm going to push Control S. That is going to give me the ability to create a J cut. From there, we can go ahead and just trim this bottom half, and now we can tighten up those 2 takes. Okay, bro. And I promise you, so that's looking pretty good, but I want to add in a jump cut because right now I'm going from one sentence to another. So let's go ahead and find my jump cut preset, which I'll just look up, and we can apply that on just like so. If we go over to our video inspector, you'll notice that I've offset the position and the scale to 130%. When you have a change in a scene, typically you want to have it change at least 30% for it to feel like an alternate camera angle. So I've zoomed in by 30%. That makes it feel like a completely different camera in some ways. Honestly, we're just fooling ourselves and telling us whatever we want to hear, but that's what's been working for me. I feel like my eye line's not quite lined up, so I'm going to push Shift-T and drag that up. Bro. And I promise you, and that's working really well. A lot of this process is me just creating those little cuts. I fix the jump cuts, I go ahead and add in some J and L cuts, and it really tends to smooth things over, make things feel snappier, more professional, and it gets the information across more clearly. After my intro, I like to add in my little animation that I built in Apple Motion. And so I'm going to push Option W to create a gap clip, and that's just going to signify to me later, place your little logo here when you're ready. Now, I've come across a section that I would like to show a picture-in-picture effect for my video. I'm not going to add the picture-in-picture effect right now, but I am going to prep myself for later so I don't forget. So to do that, I'm going to select the 3 clips that I want to use for picture-in-picture. I'm going to push Option, click and drag, and just move those up vertically. Additionally, I'm going to disable the audio on all 3 of these clips, and I'm just going to change them all over to my face. That will prep me for later when I want to go ahead and create a picture-in-picture effect, but sometimes it's easier to prep yourself for later. That way you make sure you remember for those moments. Okay, so we just finished the second pass of me going through and getting in all the J cuts and L cuts, and in fact, I found many sections that were maybe dragging on a bit. And then I even found several other mistakes that I made throughout the first pass. So that's why doing this multiple pass method is really important. Now, I did want to throw in a quick tip. Previously, I was showing how to expand out the audio by pushing Control S, and then that allows you to create a J or L cut. But I know I'm going to get somebody in the comments mentioning this system, and it does work effectively for a lot of people. I prefer to go the method that I do, but just in case this is helpful to you, we can go over to the index, go to our roles, and then select Show Audio Lanes. And you'll see that that has actually expanded out all of the audio clips. So if I needed to make a J or L cut, I could just simply trim this really, really quickly. So it is a good system. I love keyboard shortcuts, so pushing Control S is no big deal for me. You can decide what method works best for you, but just thought I'd throw that out there. So now that I have this entire edit done with all my J and L cuts, I can start to add in my zooms and the graphics that I have created. So to first add in my graphics, I'm going to open up my favorites library where I've gone ahead and added in a lot of the common keyboard shortcuts I use or the logo animation at the beginning. So we can jump in my favorites project. Here it is. I'll just copy that out with Command C and head on back over to my video and then push Option V to place it on top in the timeline. And let's just see how this plays out if possible. I feel like that needs to come in a little later. And I'm going to go ahead and make this more of an L cut. Real quick, let's cover the basics. So that is my logo animation. I built that out over in Apple Motion, and then I pre-rendered it out, and I added a bunch of sound effects to it. Why did I do it that way? Well, number one, you can't add sound effects to Apple Motion projects specifically, as in I couldn't bring in a template, which I can adjust later in Final Cut Pro. So baking it out and adding in the sound effects is definitely the best method there so that I have the sound design along with the logo animation. Secondly, this particular animation is very resource intensive. It's got a lot of motion blur and dynamic animations going on the screen. So if I was bringing that in as a template into Final Cut Pro, it would really bring my computer to its knees, even though I'm on an M4 Max. So this is by far the most effective method. I did go ahead and export it out with an alpha transparency channel, so you can see that as the animation finishes, we can see the underlying video. So by doing this, I've created a nice little logo animation that's very easy to apply to my videos, and it doesn't hurt my computer too much to add to the timeline. Next, we need to start adding in our zoom animations, and of course that's going to be with my Final Cut Pro Zooms. Editor Dylan here. I apologize for this next part of the video. Things get a little bit funky when I'm trying to show how to zoom in on the Final Cut Pro interface. It gets a little inception-y and it's not super clear, so I do apologize for that, but I wanted to show the entire process of building a video out, so that is why it's still contained in this video. Let's go ahead and jump on over to my titles, and we can find Pro Zooms here. And I'm not going to go super deep on using Pro Zooms, but a very easy method is to just simply drag it down to the timeline and find out where we want to zoom in on. Right now I'm talking about the top right corner, so I'm just going to go ahead and move my Pro Zooms over here. Let's enable it. And I don't want to show too much of the edge off there, but now we've got a nice little zoom. Your video inspector, and you'll see stuff like that. So a lot of this process is just discovering how long the zoom needs to take place, if the video is demonstrating something in that specific part, or if we need context for the entire window. Now I've reached the segment of the video where I wanted to add in that picture-in-picture effect. So what I'm going to do is bring in my Pro Zooms, drop it underneath the video clip of me talking. And then from there, let's go ahead and select one of these and we'll look up my pip effect, FCB's picture-in-picture, and we'll just drop that on. Let's go ahead and shrink me down. We can move me to any of the corners. I'll just put me in the bottom left because that's away from everything. Let me go ahead and adjust that using this on-screen control here. And now that I have this in the way I want, I'm going to select that clip, push Command C, and then I'm going to select the other two clips and push Command Shift V. And let's go ahead and only paste the FCB's picture-in-picture effect. Another part of this video is I want to draw focus to the keyframes that have actually been created in the video. So we're going to go ahead and use my Pro Focus tool, place that on the timeline, and we'll just set this to be the correct scale for our box, shrink that down, and then we could scale that up. And that just draws attention to that specific section. Let's go ahead and set this to an orange color. So yeah, Pro Focus is a great way to draw attention to stuff on the screen. That's what I primarily use. I do see the question all the time in the comments, how do you get that square animation, you can do Pro Focus. Now, I should add that Final Cut Pro 11 did add a callout feature. I find it a little bit harder to work with, but it is a great alternative, and the best part is it's free. So I've gotten all of the zooms added. It's time to add in the little graphics for our keyboard shortcuts. So I created that animation over inside of Apple Motion. And again, I'm just going to head on over to my favorites library and copy one of those over. Now that I have it copied over, I'm just going to look for these blue markers because that always indicates for me that that is a keyboard shortcut. And I'm just going to push Option V to paste it above everything. And with this little animation I created in Motion, I added some on-screen controls. I can scale it up and I can select how many keys I'm working with. And then I also added in commonly used symbols as a hidden text box. So from there, I can go ahead and just copy the exact symbols I need. So I have Shift and I have T. So I'll type those in, and now those will show up here on the screen. Plus, I can go ahead and set this to Transform Tool. And let's go ahead and see how that plays out. You can press Shift T on your keyboard. From there, I'll go ahead and recopy that little animation and go to the next marker. Okay, so I have all of the keyboard shortcuts added throughout the video. It's finally time to work on the intro and outro of the video. The first thing I want to do is have a zoom in. That's all I've been doing for my intros. I used to try and get super fancy with the editing, but I started to feel like this looks a little bit like a Mr. Beastification of my video. And so I just wanted to get into the content, keep it simple and clean. If I'm feeling creative, maybe I'll go the extra mile, but for this video, we'll just keep it simple. I always use the Premium VFX Dynamic Transitions. I absolutely love these. I have videos talking about them. What we're going to do is use the In B short, and I just drag that in as a title above everything, and we've got a zoom. Video. I'm going to show you. That's looking pretty good. Now, I also want to showcase kind of what we're featuring in the video from this point. So we're going to go throughout the video and find stuff that might look interesting to the viewer because we have 10 seconds to really hook the viewer, get them engaged, maybe show them something that they might not have known about Final Cut Pro. So what we're going to do is go ahead and search throughout the video, find those segments working with these keyframes and adding Bezier curves. So this little section looks really good to me. So I'll go ahead and copy that and we'll go back to the beginning and I'll paste it with Option V and make sure we just take that audio off of it. And then let's go ahead and trim that down and let's find another piece of animation that we can show to the viewer. I think this part showing easing with animation might be really huge for viewers. So I'm going to go ahead and showcase that as well. And we can select that and bring that over. So I think those couple clips do a great job of demonstrating what's in this video. So from there, we can go ahead and start to add in some nice visual flair. And for this, I'm using mCamRig from Motion VFX. They did add it over into their Design Studio package. I forget what it's called, but it's something about camera animation. I'll try and link to it down below. But what we'll do is go over here to the left side, and I'll just look up mCamRig. Drag that down onto the timeline. And so mCamRig gives me a lot of 3D variables I can work with here. So I want to just go ahead and focus on this section of the video. I'm going to get rid of the intro and outro animations, and I'm going to shorten that down. So from there, I want to add some 3D dimensionality to it. So let's find the rotation Y rate, and I'm going to hold Option and click and drag to really fine tune this animation. And let's actually go to the last frame. I should have done that from the beginning. And we'll just drag that back a bit somewhere in there, get this into the correct position, and let's adjust the focus offset so we're looking at the actual mouse. And let's push play. You need to know about I think that might be a little bit too fast here. Let's slow down the video clip, and we can extend that out. Let's slide this clip over here. You need to know about animation inside. Perfect. That gives us a really good idea of what's happening on screen. Then let's take mCamRig, Command-C, Option-V, paste that over here. We can slide this down to the bottom side, and I actually want to rotate in the opposite direction, so we kind of got to push-pull, and I'm going to set that to 3. And then from there, let's go ahead and adjust the camera focus offset. And I promise you, if you stick with me through this video, you're probably going to learn a thing or two that you didn't know was even possible. Another thing I really like to do is add some momentum to my talking heads at the beginning. So we're going to use my Pro Burns tool for that. So I'm just going to go look up Pro Burns and apply that onto this clip. We can expand this box out a little bit somewhere in there. And in fact, I think I already have a jump cut zoom on this. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to reset that parameter and the zoom. That's looking good. And then adjust my pro burns. You're going to learn a thing or two that you didn't know was even possible. Next, I need to find a music section, and this is where I would go over to Envato. Now, for my channel, I've just kind of gone to this funky music thing. It just feels kind of like a bro funky vibe. I don't know. I didn't choose it off of anything specific. I just kind of liked it. So let's head on over to Envato. And again, this isn't sponsored, but I do use Envato all the time. From there, let's go to audio, and we can just look up all music. And I'm just going to type in funky. Hey, that sounds good to me. It's funky, it's upbeat, exciting. Let's go ahead and download that. And we can head back into Final Cut Pro, find the Life of the Party music in our Finder, and just drag that directly onto our timeline. Now, you'll notice that it's got the effects audio roll, and I want it to be music, so I'm going to push Control, Option, and M. That'll change it over to the music roll. And then I just find the section of the music that's the most upbeat. I'm going to push Option S to solo it, and then we can just push play. That's the part right there. So I'm going to push a marker right on that moment just so I can clearly find it easily. I'm also going to push Command G, and this is going to throw it into a group. This is super helpful because I can easily trim this clip down. If I push T and trim, everything's going to slide to that music, and we can just find the exact part of the video where I want the music to really kick off. So right as I'm showing the actual animation on screen, I want the music to take over. So let's go ahead and trim this down to that moment. And that is a great place for the music to end. So I'm going to push C, which is another keyboard shortcut I changed. It's for the blade tool. So C just creates a cut. And we'll scroll to the end of our music and see if we've got a nice little reverb hit or something like that. That sounded good. We'll go ahead and create another cut, delete out the center section. So I'll go ahead and play back this music here, see how it's sounding. So that's sounding pretty good to me, but I would like to flesh it out just a little bit more. So I'm going to select both of these and push Control S to expand them. And I'm going to zoom in here with Command Plus. From there, I can go ahead and extend out this initial audio section. And you'll see if you look at the waveform, we can actually see where that hit is happening. So if we line this secondary audio component up with that, it should make things sound just a little bit better. So I'm going to move that over with period. And then we can also add in a slight fade here and fade that. Maybe I'll introduce a frame or two here at the beginning. Let's see how that sounds. So right now the music is kind of clashing with my voice. It's very loud, and also it's hitting a lot of the same frequencies that my voice would hit. So it's going to be a little bit hard to understand exactly what I'm saying. Let me show you what it sounds like without any processing. In this video, I'm going to show you absolutely everything you need to know about animation. As you can see, the volume's really clashing with it. First of all, let's go ahead and just drop the volume on this. I'm going to push Control minus to lower the volume here. And let's get that to somewhere around like -14. That's probably pretty good. If you stick with me through this video, you're probably going to learn a thing or two that you didn't know was even possible. I would like to reintroduce the music as my logo's coming up, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll zoom in on our music. I'm going to push Option and click to create a keyframe. As my voice is finishing out, let's go ahead and add another keyframe, and we can raise the volume up on that. And I'll take it to around -6 or 7. I don't really have specific values for this. It's just kind of by feel. And let's do the exact same thing with this end audio component. Bring that up to about -6. And let's see how that sounds. Is even possible. Another thing I want to do with this music is something called EQ carving. My voice naturally falls in a certain vocal range of frequencies, and the music also has those same frequencies. So when you combine them, a lot of the times there can be some clashing in the volume between my voice and the music. So by EQ carving, we're able to take out some of those frequencies in the music, and it allows my voice to come through more professionally. So to do this EQ carving, we're going to go ahead and look up the channel EQ effect over here in audio effects, and I'm going to drag that onto my music. I'm also going to go ahead and just drag it onto my dialogue, and this will allow me to use it as a tool to indicate exactly where my voice is falling in the frequencies. So we'll head over to our sound panel and open up this channel EQ for the multicam clip. And then let's also do the same for the music. So I'll open that up. And on both of these, we're going to enable the analyzer. So let's go ahead and take a look at where my vocal range is on this left-hand multicam clip. In this video, I'm going to show you absolutely everything you need to know about animation inside of Final Cut Pro. So you can see that a lot of my voice is happening from this 800 to 2000 mark, somewhere in here. So what we need to do is carve that out over in our music. So I'll go ahead and just drop that down, bring that down over in the 2000. We could even broaden the range here a bit, and let's go ahead and see how that sounds all together. In this video, I'm going to show you absolutely everything you need to know about animation inside of Final Cut Pro. Great, now we just need to add that channel EQ carving to this last audio hit. So let's just drag our channel EQ directly down to the life of the party music here at the end, and that is working beautifully. So now that we have this music chopped up, what I like to do is reintroduce this same music at the end of the video, and this is very simple because we've done all the heavy lifting here at the beginning. So I'm just going to select that group that contains both music elements, and we're going to push Command C to copy it, and then we'll just jump to the very end of our video, and we can push Command V to paste it. Now I'll just line up the very end of my video with right where I have this last musical hit, and we can also delete those keyframes out. I would also like to introduce a little bit of a slow zoom at the very end of the video to kind of signify things are coming to a close. But you also notice that my dog is down here at the very bottom left. So I'd like to do something fun with that. So firstly, let's introduce the slow zoom. I'm going to go ahead and look up Pro Burns once again, and we'll just apply that onto this clip. From there, I will back off the zoom just a little bit somewhere in there, and we'll get that into the correct positioning. And then from there, we'll use Premium VFX's dynamic zooms. So we're going to use the NA, and I'll just drag that at the very end here. And what I want to do is have it zoom in on my dog here in the bottom left. Because Nala, she gets all the likes, that's why people come to the videos. So we're going to go ahead and just take advantage of that. Now that I have my music in place, it's finally time to add in some sound design. Now, a lot of people just go on into Final Cut Pro and use the built-in sound effects here, and that's really not a bad way to do things, but I have been using the app Soundly, which is just the absolute best when it comes to adding in sound effects for Final Cut Pro. Soundly is a subscription, so I know that that gets a lot of people down, but if there's a subscription that's worth it, it's definitely Soundly. I use it in every single video. It comes with hundreds of thousands of sound effects. It's really impressive. I have a whole video on Soundly, and think of Soundly as kind of a sound effects manager, so you can create favorites, you can create individual folders, you can look up sound effects on the cloud and then download those. It's really an incredible piece of software. So I actually have a bunch of favorites I've created in my starred collection, and I know that I really like how these wings creatures sound. Perfect, so I'm just going to drag that. I'll make a selection and bring that over to my timeline, super handy. And then I want to shorten it up so it matches the same length as this little zoom animation in this video. And I would also like to add just a little bit of dynamism to this intro. So let's go ahead and add in a little bit of a zoom out. So I'm going to go over to my titles and use this zoom out from Premium VFX. I use these all the time. I'll use the short version. Great. And let's go ahead and introduce a little bit of a whoosh there. This one's sounding good to me, so we'll drag that down onto the timeline. You're probably going to learn a thing or two that you didn't know was even possible. If my video had more transitions throughout it, I would add in those sound effects. Maybe if I had more graphical effects, I would add in those sound effects. I already have sound effects introduced with my keyboard shortcuts, and those are all inside of my favorites library. So I don't need to worry about adding each of those individually, which is kind of nice. But I can go through and find maybe different on-screen elements to add sound effects to, and I just do that tastefully. I don't want to draw too much attention to it, but if I feel like it improves it, then I will go ahead and make those additions. And finally, last but not least, let's go ahead and add in one last little sound effect here, zooming in on the puppo. Perfect, we'll use this one. Excellent. Great, and we'll trim off the end of that. make it nice and short. And I also like to drop in a gap clip here, so I'll push Option W and just shorten that to be the same duration as the music. Okay, so it's actually the next day. Excuse the little costume change we've got going on here. I rewatched the video after I exported it out last night, and I noticed there's just some stuff that's missing that I really need to add clarification to the video and to keep it more engaging. So the first thing I want to add is some more on-screen elements to draw attention to something I'm talking about. And in this instance, it's me talking about keyframes. Now, more recently, I've been using Design Studio quite a bit. I know people don't like the subscription. I'm not sponsored by Motion VFX or anything, but I do find that the more and more they're adding to Design Studio, the more valuable it is to me as a creator. So I'm going to actually use some really cool arrow animations from there, and we can get that up here using the extension tool, and we'll just go to M extension. And look, it's Brad West. What a legend. So I looked up this arrow tool, and I'm just going to actually drag that down onto my timeline, and we can close that out. And so I want to draw attention to these different keyframes showing up here. So what we'll do is just drag this down, and that might be a bit large, so let's just shrink it up a bit. And I do want it to match the branded colors of my channel, so let's just change it over to kind of an orange color. That's looking pretty good. And then I'm going to duplicate that with Option, click, and drag. And then I can drag this over to the other keyframes. Now I've offset them a bit just to make the animation feel a little bit more dynamic, but let's go ahead and watch that. So that's one element, but I also want to add some nice chapter markers kind of throughout the video. So rather than just having the timestamps on YouTube, I'm going to visually show that we're moving into a new chapter. Fortunately, I've already gone through and marked out all the chapters. If you don't know how to get those, you can push Option M. That gives you this little selection menu, and you can change this over to a chapter marker. I've also created a custom keyboard shortcut for Option C to add in chapter markers, so you can do the same if that's something that you do throughout your videos. So first we need to add a chapter marker for this beginning section. I would call this particular chapter the basics, so we just need to come up with a look for that. I'll go ahead and open up my browser here on the left with Command Control 1. And I'm going to scroll down and locate my FCB's minimalist backgrounds pack that I created. And let's just bring in these hexagons. I always like how these look. From there, I'm going to go ahead and look up my FCB's Patreon. And I actually just created this nice little smooth up animation. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. We'll just apply that onto the timeline, the basics. And I also want to add in a nice little animation into each of these chapter sequences. So let's go for Premium VFX's dynamic transitions once again. And I'm just going to do a zoom out. So we'll do zoom out A to zoom out B short. Basics. How do you do animation? And I would like to add a nice little audible sound effect to that chapter. So let's head over to Soundly, and I'll just find a nice little simple whoosh. I really like how this one sounds, so I'll just add that in. Basics. How do you do animation in Final? And let's bring down the volume on that with Control minus. Basics. How do you do animation? So it is a very simple graphic, but I think it helps the viewer know exactly where they are in the video, and it also visually breaks things up to keep people more engaged.
1 million, zillion, jillion, dillion, cotillion times later.
Okay, so I've gone through, added all the chapter markers, and I want to add two last graphics to really polish off this video. At the end, I talk about all of the Apple Motion videos I make, and I just think bringing those on screen is going to really help the viewer know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and open up Google Chrome. We'll go to YouTube, and I'm going to locate my Apple Motion playlist. And here is the entire playlist. So I'm just going to grab a screenshot of all of this. And I have a little extension with Google Chrome. I rarely use Google Chrome, but I use it for this one specific reason right here. I can go ahead and select Go Full Page, and that's going to take a screenshot of all of the different videos, which can be super handy for creating a nice little screenshot inside of my own videos. We'll go ahead and bring that in from Finder, and I'll just drag that down on my timeline. And I'm going to change the spatial conform from fit over to fill. So that's going to automatically zoom in so we can see the entire list. Now looking at this graphic, you'll notice there's that weird screenshot issue on the left-hand side. This is really not a big problem. I'm actually just going to trim off everything that is not the videos. So I'm going to push Shift-C to get the crop tool, and we can zoom out here a bit. I'm going to find that corner, and we'll just trim this in so we're only seeing our video elements. That's looking pretty good. Then from there, I'm going to go over to my generators, And we'll just look up the custom generator and apply that onto the timeline. Now, with this generator selected, I'm going to change the color to the exact same color as my YouTube backdrop. It looks like my cropping didn't work totally, so let's go ahead and trim off just a little bit more, and we'll push done. And let's see, that's looking pretty good. So now from here, we can just add in a basic animation of all of this scrolling up. So I'm just going to add in a keyframe here at the very beginning, then we'll go to the end, and I will drag this up in the Y direction quite a ways. I don't want to go too far, otherwise it'll be too fast. Perfect, that's looking really good. So now we have this nice little animation, and I'm just going to place that over the section where I'm talking about my Apple Motion playlist. I do want to add another level of dimension to it, so we're going to use mCamRig for that. So again, we'll go over here to the left side, look up mCamRig, place that over the top, and this is just going to add that nice 3D look to this little animation. And let's go ahead and set the Y rotation rate up a little bit. We'll go to the very end so we know how far we're rotating, and we'll disable the in and out animations. So that's at 6. That's maybe a little too far. Let's go the other direction, actually. Perfect. Maybe right in there. And then we can also adjust the focus offset. So we're focusing on the correct part, which would be the thumbnails. And now we should have a nice little animation here, all about animation and how to get it over into Final Cut Pro. And one other thing I'm noticing is that the rolling of the list is starting a little slow, and that's just due to the easing in Final Cut. So what we're going to do is push Control V to get the animation inspector. We're going to change this over to position, and then I can right click on that keyframe and set it over to linear. So now it should have a nice consistent speed across the board. Where I teach all about animation and how to get it over into Final Cut Pro. So now we can just add in the final graphic, which is my new comprehensive list of animation plugins. So what we can do is head on over to Finder, locate that screen capture that I already snagged. Let's change the spatial conform over to fill. And that is looking beautiful. And it's actually already a pretty great scale. So we'll just start from here. That's looking good. Let's extend out the duration a bit. We'll add a keyframe at the beginning. And then let's go ahead and go to somewhere in the end. It doesn't have to be all the way down, but that's looking pretty good. Now I do want to add again that dimensionality to it. So we're going to add mCamRig onto this. I'm going to push Option, click and drag to duplicate that and extend that out here. And there it is. It looks like we have a finished video. From this point, it's time to export it and get it onto YouTube. And so I'm going to let my past self take over and finish that process. A question I am constantly getting asked is, what are the best export settings for YouTube? Well, it's super complicated, so bear with me. We're going to go up to the share menu. We're going to select export file. Then from there, we'll go to settings, and we're going to make sure that the format is set to computer, and the video codec is H.264. The resolution is as high as it can go, depending on what you're editing. And that's it. From there, we'll push next, and we can locate the export file. So I'll find my exports, and you can see here that I have that text edit file that I mentioned way earlier in this video that is labeled as T438. My workflow. And so rather than manually typing that in, I can just simply click that text edit file and it gets the exact same name. So once I do that, I can go ahead and press save. And while Final Cut Pro is exporting, we can go ahead and expand that out and see how fast it goes. So it should take just a couple minutes to get that 14-minute long video done. This is where I can start on the thumbnail process. So let's go ahead and find a screenshot of that exact moment that I want to work with. And I feel like this moment is actually a really good one. Now, I could take the time to go ahead and select share and select save current frame. However, I was stupid and I didn't export this before I exported the other video. So I just have to sit and wait. So I'm just going to go ahead and screenshot it with Command-Shift-4 and click and drag over the top of it. Later, I can introduce a higher quality export if I need to, but I feel like this one is looking really, really good. After that, I will jump on over into Finder, go to my tutorials category, my thumbnails, and open up my thumbnail preset that I talked a little bit about earlier when I was doing the post-haste section of this video. This thumbnail preset, it just has a lot of the different elements that I typically use inside of my thumbnails for Final Cut Pro on YouTube. I've got my basic title item that I use all the time. I've got my mouse, You got this shiny spot. I've got the Final Cut Pro logo. I've got the gradient. I've got the explosive background. And I even have some elements that are not enabled, like different timelines and stuff I've taken screenshots of over the years. So this really speeds up my process for creating a good looking thumbnail that is very cohesive to my project. So what I can do is just locate that thumbnail I took a screenshot of earlier and just drag that in. And I'll just go ahead and line this up in the way that I need to. I might put this more on the left-hand side because a lot of the right side is covered up with the YouTube kind of time code that it's got. And I'm not quite sure what my title is going to be here, but Ultimate Animation Guide. We'll just write something like that. I might tweak it later, but we could shrink that down, get it over here on the right side. I'm not particularly crazy about the sharp edge that it has here on the right, so let's go ahead and use the mask tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a gradient tool and just click and drag, and that's going to soften up that edge. So we've got the ease in option, which is super handy. And from there, we can go ahead and figure out where our Final Cut Pro logo is going to go. We definitely want it pretty visible. Maybe I'll kind of shrink it down here to the corner. And I already like the mouse that I have, but I might just make it even larger because it really showcases, hey, there's easing in this. The shiny sparkles might be getting a little bit too much. Let me just kind of push them off to the side a little bit, make it a little bit easier to read. Maybe we can back down the opacity on that. I am also noticing that it's being affected by the curves adjustment, so I'm going to bring that up above the curves. Now we can see it a little bit more clearly, and maybe I'll increase the scale on that so you can really see the ease in, ease out. And again, I haven't really thought of this beforehand, which is unfortunate because I'm just trying to figure out ideas as I'm filming, and this entire thumbnail might be completely different when you finally see it in the end, but this is kind of my basic process. And I don't know that I actually need this shiny spot, so I'm just going to disable that. And I am happy with having the orange on the right and the blue on the left. That actually matches my thumbnail style very well, so that's super fortunate. But I think if we zoom out, we should get a good idea. Is that giving us a good indication of animation in Final Cut? It is starting to work pretty well for me. I would like this Final Cut logo to pop a little bit more, so maybe I'll shrink it down and have it just barely covering up some of the text. And I feel like this text isn't being super legible, so let's maybe play around with that. I'm going to use the gradient tool with G here in Affinity Photo, and we'll maybe expand that out. Then I might change the color on this over to more of a bluish tone so that it stands out against the orange. And that is working all right for me. You'll also notice the outline kind of has that reddish hue to it. So let's go into our effects and I'll adjust the outline to be more blue somewhere in there so it matches better with that title. Let's go ahead and get rid of Ultimate and just maybe make it a little bit easier to read. We can expand that, make the size larger. And one last thing, I kind of want this explosive energy to be coming either from the Final Cut logo or directly from the animation guide. I feel like when it's coming from the title itself, it draws your eye to the title a bit more and gives people a good idea of what the video is about. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And I'm liking that. I feel like that's a pretty solid thumbnail right there. Again, I might change it up and I might also introduce some other variations. We are going to go ahead and go with this thumbnail for this particular video. Again, I might change it down the road. There is a lot of this give and take with YouTube where you're trying out different thumbnail styles. So from there, I can go ahead and export that out. And we'll just make sure that the JPEG is under 2 megabytes, which is what is required by YouTube. So push export, and I will drop that into my thumbnails category and push save. And I'll also push Command S to make sure I save this project. So now that that's done, it looks like our video finished exporting while we were building out the thumbnail. So let's just jump on over to Safari. We'll go to YouTube and get that uploading. And while that is uploading, I'm of course going to go in, update my description with all the accurate information I need and all the links. Additionally, I'll come down and upload my thumbnail that we created. This is when I take the opportunity to get all my chapter markers in. And that's made super easy here in Final Cut by going over to my extensions. And I have this great extension called Creator's Best Friend. And I'll jump over to my project and we can locate the finished edit. So right here, it's this A7 III. And I'll just drop that in. And just like that, we have all of the different chapter markers I created. So we'll copy that to clipboard and then just drop that into the chapters here. And I'm going to rename the start to be intro with your bro. So from there, once I've got my perfect title for the video and I'm ready to go, I push publish. I don't wait around and schedule it or anything. Some people think that that's not a good idea, but it's been working for me to not stress about a specific upload time. I just upload when the video is ready. Takes a lot of pressure off, and it adds to the excitement because the video is actually done and ready to go. So yeah, that's the whole process. That is how I create a video, from idea to filming to editing, all the different tools I use, exporting and getting onto YouTube. If you've stuck around this long, you win. You are awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I have links to everything mentioned throughout this video, all the gear I'm using, all of the apps I'm using, all the plugins I'm using. Everything is going to be combined together on a special web page. That way you can easily find it all, and you can purchase those using those links, which does help the channel out tremendously if you do that. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.